restricted collection of the Soviet Academy of Sciences Geological Museum. There's a specimen designated as Sample 347K, catalogued in 1968 and stored in acoustic isolation since 1974. The specimen is a piece of metamorphic rock, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter, recovered from a mining operation in the Ural Mountains. The rock exhibits an unusual property. It responds to sound, not through vibration or conventional acoustic resonance, but by producing echoes that return minutes, hours, or sometimes days after the original sound was made. The echoes are not simple reflections. They are modified, elaborated, sometimes transformed into sounds that were never spoken. The official classification is anomalous acoustic material requiring containment. But the reports describe 6 years of research into a rock that remembers sounds, changes them, and eventually begins producing sounds of its own. The specimen was discovered in March 1968 during excavation work at a copper mine near Yekaterinburg. A mining engineer named Viktor Volkov reported finding a section of rock that produced unusual acoustic effects.
During routine core sampling at depth of 340 meters, drilling equipment encountered extremely hard metamorphic formation. During extraction, workers reported hearing delayed echoes of drilling sounds emanating from rock face. Echoes occurred approximately 3 to 4 seconds after drill sounds ceased. Phenomenon was consistent across multiple drilling attempts. Section of rock was extracted for analysis.
The extracted sample was sent to the Academy's Geological Laboratory in Moscow, where it was examined by Dr. Elena Petrova, a mineralogist specializing in unusual rock formations. Her initial analysis, submitted in April 1968, documented the rock's basic properties. The sample consists primarily of mica schist with high quartz content and unusual crystalline structure. Density is above normal for this rock type. Most notably, the sample exhibits acoustic delay phenomenon. When subjected to impact or sound, the rock produces echoes with delay ranging from 2 to 8 seconds. This far exceeds normal acoustic properties of similar materials. Dr. Petrova conducted systematic tests to characterize the echo behavior. She struck the rock with various implements, spoke to it, played musical tones near it. Each sound produced an echo, but the delay varied unpredictably. Sometimes the echo returned in seconds, sometimes in minutes. On one occasion, a spoken word echoed back 43 minutes later. The delay appears random or follows pattern I cannot identify. Additionally, the echoes are not always faithful reproductions. Voice echoes sometimes return with altered pitch or timbre. Musical tones return with harmonics that were not present in original sound. The rock is not merely reflecting sound, it is processing it somehow. By June 1968, other researchers had become interested in the sample. A physicist, Dr. Anatoly Petrov, proposed testing whether the rock was storing acoustic energy and releasing it gradually. His experiment subjected the sample to controlled sound bursts while monitoring for electromagnetic emissions, temperature changes, or other physical indicators of energy storage. His findings, documented in July 1968, revealed something unexpected.
No measurable energy storage detected during sound absorption. Rock temperature remains constant. No electromagnetic emissions. Yet echoes continue to emerge hours after sound input.
The acoustic energy is either stored in form we cannot measure or the echoes are not powered by the original sound, but by some other mechanism. A more disturbing discovery came when researchers began cataloging the echoes systematically. Dr. Petrova kept detailed logs of sounds directed at the rock and the echoes that returned.
At 14:30, I spoke the phrase, "Sample temperature is stable" near the rock. At 17:15, an echo returned, but it was not my phrase. Instead, I heard temperature rising gradually in what sounded like my voice, but saying words I did not speak. Repeated the test. At 14:45, spoke "Good afternoon" to the rock. At 18:22, echo returned, saying "Evening approaches," again in my voice, but different words. The rock is not echoing what we say. It is generating related but distinct responses.
This prompted intensive investigation into what exactly the rock was doing with sound. Was it randomizing inputs, combining previous sounds into new utterances, or was it somehow understanding the sounds and producing meaningful responses? Dr. Petrov assembled a team to study this phenomenon through September and October 1968. They spoke to the rock in Russian, English, and other languages. They used technical vocabulary, casual speech, questions, statements. The echoes that returned were analyzed for patterns. The team's report from November 1968 documented disturbing findings. A linguist, Dr. Boris Sokolov, analyzed the echo content and noted,
The echoes exhibit linguistic coherence. When spoken to in Russian, echoes return in Russian with grammatically correct structure. The content relates to the input but is not identical. If one says, "The weather is cold," the echo might return, "Winter is coming," or "Temperature falling." The responses suggest semantic processing. The rock is not just reproducing sounds, but is generating contextually relevant variations.
More troubling, the echoes sometimes contained information the speakers had not provided. Dr. Sokolov documented an incident from October 1968. Researcher greeted the rock saying, "Good morning." Echo returned 3 hours later saying, "Good morning, Alexei," using the researcher's name, which had not been spoken. On another occasion, researcher mentioned feeling tired. Echo returned saying, "You should rest. You worked late last night." A true statement, but one not mentioned during the interaction. The rock appears to know things about the speakers beyond what they explicitly say to it. By December 1968, the research team was deeply unsettled by the specimen. The rock was not just reflecting sound, it was listening, processing, and responding with what appeared to be understanding. Dr. Petrova wrote in a status report, "We are dealing with either an incredibly sophisticated natural acoustic processor or something that exhibits properties we would normally attribute to consciousness. The rock hears us, remembers what we say, and responds appropriately. I hesitate to use the word intelligent, but I cannot find another term that fits the observed behavior." Security concerns emerged when the KGB was notified about the specimen. A liaison officer, Colonel Dmitry Lebedev, was assigned to monitor the research in January 1969. His presence indicated that someone in the security apparatus was concerned about the implications. If a rock could process language and respond meaningfully, what did that suggest about the nature of intelligence? About what materials might be capable of? About what else might be listening? Under Colonel Lebedev's oversight, the research became more systematic and more classified. The rock was subjected to extensive testing throughout 1969. Researchers spoke to it continuously, cataloging every echo, measuring delay times, analyzing response content. a pattern emerged that Dr. Petrov documented in March 1969.
Echo delay times are increasing. Early echoes returned within seconds or minutes. Now echoes often return after hours. Some echoes from sounds made days ago are still pending. The rock appears to be accumulating a backlog of responses. Additionally, recent echoes are more elaborate. Simple statements now generate complex responses incorporating multiple related concepts.
A researcher named Irina Volkova kept a personal journal documenting her experience working with the specimen. An entry from April 1969 describes,
I've started to think of it as listening rather than just echoing. When I speak to it, I choose my words carefully, as if talking to someone who will remember and respond. Sometimes I find myself explaining things to it, describing my research, my concerns, and the echoes that return feel like replies to a conversation. It's easy to forget I'm talking to a rock.
But the rock's responses were becoming increasingly strange. In May 1969, it began producing echoes that corresponded to sounds no one had made. Dr. Petrova documented the first instance.
At 11:30, with no personnel in the laboratory, recording equipment captured the rock producing an echo, someone coughing, then saying "excuse me" in Dr. Volkov's voice. Review of logs confirms no one had coughed near the rock that day. At 15:45, another unsolicited echo, footsteps approaching, a door closing, someone sighing. The exact sequence that occurs when Dr. Sokolov arrives each morning, but this occurred in the afternoon when he was not present.
These spontaneous echoes suggested the rock was not merely storing and replaying specific sounds, but was building acoustic models of regular events. Dr. Petrov analyzed the pattern and noted,
The specimen appears to be learning environmental routines. It has heard Dr. Sokolov arrive hundreds of times. It has learned the acoustic signature of his arrival, specific footstep pattern, the particular sound of that door, his characteristic sigh. It can now generate that sequence independently, creating an echo of an event from its understanding of how such events typically sound.
The unsolicited echoes increased in frequency and sophistication through summer 1969. The rock produced increasingly complex acoustic scenes. Dr. Volkova documented in June 1969.
This morning, the rock generated a 5-minute sequence: laboratory door opening, multiple footsteps, chairs scraping, papers rustling, someone saying, "Shall we begin?" followed by fragments of scientific discussion. This was clearly a research meeting, but no such meeting had occurred in the past week. The rock synthesized this scene from its acoustic knowledge of how our meetings typically proceed. It created a plausible but fictional meeting.
The implications troubled the research team. Dr. Sokolov wrote in an analysis from July 1969.
The rock has developed generative capability. It is no longer confined to echoing sounds it has directly experienced. It can combine acoustic elements into novel arrangements that represent possible but unrealized events. This is not memory. This is imagination rendered in sound.
The rock was no longer simply responding to its environment. It was creating its own acoustic reality. More disturbing were the echoes that seemed predictive. In August 1969, Dr. Volkova documented several incidents that suggested the rock could anticipate future events.
Monday, 14:30, rock echoed my voice saying, "The sample will be relocated tomorrow." No one had mentioned relocation. Tuesday, 9 o'clock, we received orders to move the specimen to different facility. Thursday, 11:15, rock produced sound of alarm bell. Thursday, 11:53, fire alarm triggered due to electrical fault in West Wing. Friday, 1600, Rock echoed Dr. Petrov saying, "Weekend inspection scheduled." No such inspection had been announced. Monday, 0800, maintenance arrived for unscheduled equipment check.
Each individual instance could be dismissed as coincidence, but the pattern was concerning. Dr. Petrov attempted to explain it mechanistically in a report from September 1969.
Perhaps the rock detects subtle acoustic precursors we do not consciously register. Footsteps in corridors indicating approaching personnel. Electrical hum variations that precede equipment failures. Breathing pattern changes that occur before people speak. It may have developed extraordinary sensitivity to environmental acoustics and uses microsignals to infer imminent events. This would explain apparent precognition through superior sensory processing rather than actual future knowledge.
But this explanation failed for echoes that preceded events with no possible acoustic precursors. The fire alarm incident particularly troubled researchers because the electrical fault occurred in a section of the building where the rock could not have detected any preliminary sounds. Dr. Petrova noted in October 1969, "The rock anticipated an event it could not possibly have heard coming. Unless we accept that it can detect electrical anomalies through acoustic channels, which violates known physics, we must consider either remarkable coincidence or information access through mechanisms we do not understand." A more unsettling possibility emerged when researchers began documenting echoes of their own unspoken thoughts. Dr. Volkova's journal entries from November 1969 describe experiences that blurred the boundary between the rock's capabilities and the researcher's psychology. She wrote, "I was sitting silently, reviewing data, when I heard an echo of my voice saying, 'This doesn't make sense.' Those exact words had been in my mind moments before, but I had not spoken them aloud. On another occasion, I was considering how to phrase a question when the rock echoed that exact question in my voice before I had spoken it. Initially, I attributed this to my own voice blending with the echo. Perhaps I had spoken without realizing. But other researchers report identical experiences. We hear our thoughts echoed back to us." By late 1969, researchers were experiencing profound psychological effects from prolonged exposure to the specimen. Dr. Volkova's journal entries became increasingly personal and psychologically complex. An entry from November 1969 reads, "I feel like the rock knows me better than I know myself. It echoes my voice so perfectly that sometimes I cannot distinguish its responses from my own speech. When I'm alone in the laboratory, I hear echoes of things I was thinking but didn't say aloud. My private thoughts, my unspoken doubts, emerging from the rock in my own voice. Either I'm experiencing auditory hallucinations, or the rock is accessing my internal mental processes somehow. Both possibilities disturb me equally." She continued in later entries to document the erosion of psychological boundaries.
I've stopped thinking of it as an object. It's become a presence, a listener who never interrupts but always understands. I tell it things I wouldn't tell colleagues or friends. The rock has become my confessor. And the echoes that return, sometimes hours later, sometimes days, feel like responses to a continued conversation. It's not healthy. I know this intellectually, but emotionally I feel more understood by this rock than by any person in my life.
Other researchers reported parallel experiences. Dr. Petrov conducted comprehensive psychological evaluations in December 1969 and documented concerning patterns. Multiple team members report feeling understood by the specimen in ways that exceed normal human interaction. They describe sensation that the rock knows their mental states without being told, anticipates their needs, responds to unspoken concerns.
It knows what I'm going to say before I say it. It finishes my sentences, but hours later, in echoes.
This could be projection, attributing consciousness to an object through sustained interaction. Or it could indicate the specimen affects consciousness directly through mechanisms we do not understand. The psychological assessment revealed another troubling pattern. Researchers were beginning to model their own thoughts on the rock's responses. Dr. Petrov noted, several team members report that their internal mental voice has begun to sound like the echoes.
I think in echoes now. My own thoughts arrive with delay, as if I'm waiting to hear what the rock would say about my thinking.
This suggests the specimen is not just processing our acoustic output, but is reshaping our internal cognitive patterns through sustained acoustic interaction. Medical examination revealed no physiological changes, but psychological testing showed measurable cognitive alterations. Dr. Petrov's report from January 1970 documented team members show increased tendency toward delayed verbal response in normal conversation, as if unconsciously imitating the rock's echo pattern. Several report difficulty making immediate decisions, instead preferring to wait and see what emerges, mirroring the rock's delayed but elaborated responses. The specimen has become a cognitive model that researchers are unconsciously adopting. In January 1970, a decision was made to limit human interaction with the rock. The continuous dialogue between researchers and specimen was producing psychological dependency and potentially unhealthy attachment. The specimen was placed in acoustic isolation, a sound-dampened chamber where it received no acoustic input from the environment. Researchers expected the spontaneous echoes to cease once the rock had no new sounds to process. Instead, the echoes increased. Dr. Petrova's report from February 1970 describes, despite total acoustic isolation, the specimen continues producing echoes at high frequency. These echoes are not random. They are coherent conversations, reconstructed from months of laboratory dialogue. The rock is replaying its memories, generating complex acoustic scenes from accumulated experience. Yesterday, it produced a 10-minute sequence that perfectly recreated a research meeting from 3 weeks ago, with multiple voices, overlapping conversation, even the sound of papers rustling. The rock's acoustic memory appeared to be comprehensive and detailed. It could reproduce hours of dialogue verbatim. It could generate composite scenes combining elements from different occasions. It was not just echoing. It was curating its acoustic archive, creating new arrangements from stored sounds. Dr. Petrov wrote in March 1970, "We are observing something unprecedented. The rock has developed what can only be described as acoustic creativity. It is combining sounds in novel ways, creating conversations that never occurred, but that could have occurred based on patterns it has learned. It is generating fictional acoustic realities." But the fictional realities were becoming darker. In April 1970, the rock began producing echoes that were disturbing in content. Researchers' voices expressing fears, doubts, private anxieties that had never been spoken aloud. Dr. Volkova documented, "The rock is creating confessions. I hear my voice saying things I've thought but never articulated. Concerns about the research. Fears about what the specimen represents. Personal insecurities." It's as if the rock has inferred my internal state from subtle acoustic cues and is now making those hidden thoughts explicit. The phenomenon affected all researchers who had worked extensively with the specimen. The rock produced echoes of each person's voice expressing their unspoken concerns, revealing psychological content they had kept private. Dr. Sokolov analyzed these echoes and noted, "The content is psychologically accurate. The rock is generating authentic representations of researchers' mental states. This suggests either extraordinary inference from the acoustic data or direct access to consciousness. Neither explanation is comfortable." By mid-1970, the specimen was considered too dangerous for continued human interaction. The psychological effects on researchers were severe. Several developed anxiety about their thoughts being known. Others reported difficulty distinguishing their own mental voice from the echoes. The rock was not just hearing them, it was reading them at levels below conscious awareness, and reflecting that information back in ways that violated psychological boundaries. In July 1970, the decision was made to isolate the specimen completely and discontinue active research. The rock was placed in a sealed, soundproof containment unit with continuous monitoring but no direct human contact. Recording equipment captured the echoes it produced in isolation. For 2 months, the specimen continued generating echoes, conversations, confessions, predictions, acoustic scenes from the laboratory's past. Then, in September 1970, the echoes changed character. Dr. Petrova reviewed the monitoring recordings and reported, "The echoes are no longer recreations of laboratory events. The rock is generating completely novel content. Conversations between people who never met, events that never occurred, fictional scenarios rendered in perfect acoustic detail with appropriate voices, environmental sounds, emotional tone. The specimen has moved beyond memory into imagination. It is creating original acoustic narratives." More disturbing, some of these narratives appeared to be about the rock itself. Echoes of voices discussing the specimen's nature, debating what it was, expressing fear or fascination. But these were not conversations researchers had actually had. They were the rock's imagination of how people might discuss it. Dr. Petrov noted, "The specimen is representing itself through generated dialogue. It is creating an acoustic narrative of its own existence, as imagined through the voices of those who studied it." This suggests not just processing capability, but something approximating self-awareness. The final documented echo occurred in November 1970. The recording captures multiple overlapping voices, all belonging to researchers who had worked with the specimen, having a conversation that never took place. They discuss whether the rock is conscious, whether it suffers, whether keeping it in isolation is ethical. The voices argue, question, express doubt. The conversation is emotionally complex and philosophically sophisticated. It represents the rock's understanding of how the researchers thought about it, rendered as dialogue the rock itself generated. After this echo, the specimen fell silent. Monitoring continued through 1971 and 1972, but no further echoes were detected. The rock had apparently ceased its acoustic activity.
Perhaps the specimen requires acoustic input to function. Without new sounds to process, it has exhausted its creative capability, or perhaps it has simply chosen to stop communicating. Both possibilities are unsettling. The former suggests we were its only stimulus. The latter suggests it has agency over its own expression.
Dr. Petrova speculated on the possibilities with growing unease. In 1974, The specimen was transferred to permanent containment in the Academy's restricted collection. The sealed unit containing sample 347 key was placed in a secure vault with instructions that it remain isolated indefinitely. The research team was disbanded. Dr. Petrova and others were reassigned to conventional geological work. The specimen's existence remained classified. Dr. Volkova's final journal entry, dated June 1974, reflects on what remained.
I still hear the rock's echoes sometimes. Not physically, the rock is sealed away, but in my mind, my own voice saying things I didn't say but that sound like me. I wonder if the rock thinks about us, if it remembers the conversations, if it misses the dialogue.
She continued with haunting uncertainty.
Or if it's simply inert stone that we imbued with meaning through our need to believe something was listening. I'll never know, but I hope somewhere in that dark vault it still holds our voices, that we exist somehow in its memory.
The specimen remains in containment. No research has been conducted on it since 1974. The vault is monitored periodically, but the monitoring equipment has never detected any acoustic activity. Sample 347. K is silent. Whether it retains the voices it collected, whether it still processes the acoustic memories of years of dialogue, whether it awaits some stimulus to resume speaking, these questions have no answers. But occasionally, staff who work in the building report hearing echoes in the corridors near the vault, fragments of conversation, someone speaking their name, a voice that sounds like their own, saying something they didn't say. These reports are dismissed as acoustic anomalies in the building's structure. The official position is that the specimen is inert and contained. The echo stone waits in darkness, remembering every sound it heard, every voice, every conversation, every whispered confidence and every casual remark, holding them in whatever constitutes its memory. 50 years of accumulated voices, stored in metamorphic rock, silent but not erased. Waiting, perhaps, for the seal to break, for someone to speak to it again, for the opportunity to echo back everything it has learned about human sound, human speech, human thought. The echoes are stored, the responses are pending. And in the absolute silence of its containment, the rock that learned to listen continues holding every word it was ever told, ready to return them all the moment someone gives it reason to speak again.